Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to some more Warforge content, and today I am bringing you my Varro Midrange Zeal Spice. And before we even get into it, I have to say Varro was like my favorite Ultramarines leader, but just leader in the game, warlord in the game rather, when I first started playing. So I am so happy to be back because I just loved I always love the kind of like psyker animation stuff in the game already. Like even with Sylar as well, who has like the red psychic stuff going on. Varro's got the blue psychic stuff going on. And I just always thought that kind of idea for a warlord of like you have this like toolkit and they're at even and odd costs, so you can do different things with it to really trigger codex was always really interesting to me. Now we have way more codex support even on this release. And what I've been feeling about Uriel is that although he's been a pretty solid aggressive option for a bit, minus the, losing that extra card, what I feel like we were missing is the fact that card advantage, right, in the later stages of the game. So my idea for this deck before we even dive in was basically like, well, Varro can play aggressively too, but then have the reach to find your death from aboves later on. And we'll talk about, an excellent card today that I think fits this strategy. It's a little counterintuitive, but there is a logic to why we would play Avenging Zeal more in this list than anything. Although I still think that it might be slightly better in Calgar builds that we've been trying out. So, but I wanted to get all of the warlords up there so people could kind of have an idea of where I would approach these things from. So as always, thank you for likes, comments, subscribes. All that interaction keeps the war machine here ongoing as we lead our chapter brothers into some battle. So let's just get into it, and I'll kind of explain why I sort of build the deck the way it is. So you're going to see a lot of a very similar construction to my Uriel build that I posted earlier on. I'm recording a couple days later, so I guess earlier that week. And again, the logic here is that we're basically building an aggressive Ultramarine strategy, but inside of like a Varro, basically just with Varro leading the charge, because that he's going to give you that extra card advantage. So we're pretty much running the same build. Double tactical insight. This thing does work when you have these early turns with Firstborn. It's probably one of the craziest things you can do is when you're on the draw is play your Firstborn, get the trigger, tactical insight, reduce your 3-drop, play like a Stern Guard or another 3-drop or whatever, and then your Firstborn is a 3/4/4 on turn 1. So you can have these really explosive aggressive starts that are supported by the codex triggers here. Then you've got your typical 2 death from above. Primaris Chaplain I think is just an excellent card. It's probably just needs to be, like, even with all the vehicle stuff going on, this thing got a strict buff. And I just, if you don't answer it, your opponent's going to run away with the game. So I think that Primaris Chaplain really is probably a necessity in every single Ultramarine build. We're running really as much burn as we can, aside from 1 point blank. So we've got the 2 Storm Ravens, the 2 Death from Aboves, 1 point blank shot, Polixis to kind of keep us in the hunt if we're falling behind, Inspired Retribution, of course. All of these stratagems you can grab off of the 2 energy ability for Varro. So, you really have access to these things pretty much whenever you want them. But the way that you're going to play this deck, and we'll go over 3 games in my battle log because I just rattled off some really great games and wanted to kind of showcase the strengths and potentially the weaknesses of the deck. Inspired Retribution obviously going to be there. 2 Inceptor Sergeants to keep the tempo. Calcius is going to be obviously your other way of just closing out the game. Librarian, and then a newcomer to the roster here in Avenging Zeal. So if you have not seen this, and I love the Gilliman art, I'm sure we're going to see him maybe at some point in the near future. So again, same thing, +2 melee attack and 2 range to all your units in play in hand. Now, you might be thinking, Tim, you're playing Varro, so you're stacking your hand full of stratagems. At certain points in the game, your hand may look like that. But again, this is more of like a cheap effect to give your warlord +2/+2, right? It becomes a 4/4 now instead of a 2 attacking power leader. And if you give one or two other units that in your hand, great. But I don't think you need to play this in a deck that's, primarily units. Obviously, Calgar has a little bit of that benefit, but what Calgar can't do is reliably rather add stratagems to his hand. So the thinking here is that because we have a higher chance of nabbing Avenging Zeal early on, we're going to be able to take advantage of the Codex triggers because we're running all of the best kind of Codex cheap aggressive cards, and then Avenging Zeal is just going to help us go over the top and really allow us to close out games. And in one of our battle log games, you're going to see, like, if someone has a slow start and you get to play this on, potentially 5 energy, 6 energy, I would say 5 or 4 would be really incredible. It's a problem for your opponent because you're just going to outrace them. It's like a mini Dracnian, if you want to think about it that way. That doesn't cost 6 when you get it to cheaper. So Avenging Zeal, I think, actually has quite a lot of potential as a way to just go over the top of some of the other late game strategies and stop your opponent from stabilizing. So this may be a card that I'll experiment even with Uriel, but I think it's probably just going to be best suited for card advantage warlords like Varro and Calgar. So very, very similar shell to what we've been using. Again, I have always been kind of the champion of Ultramarines do one thing fairly well, and it's play aggressively and have burn enough to close out the game, right? Because Death from Above used to be 5 for 4, and it got nerfed down to 4, but you still have plenty of burn in this deck, and we'll kind of see how the games play out. So let me know what you think. I do want to try a Varro vehicle build. That's something I'm kind of curious on, because maybe I can nab my battlefield supremacy with my ability, and kind of take advantage of that, because in my Calgar video, I think there are definitely some tweaks that I want to be making at some point. But I actually think, just to kind of like do a quick reflection on Varro after he's been out of the meta for like many seasons, I guess, really since season 1 or 2, I think he is potentially the real deal. I think that there is a world in which Uriel gets a little overshadowed by Varro, in the sense that you can play a very similar style, but Varro gives you the reach and the card advantage that you need, and the modality to make sure that you're never missing Codex and you don't need to play 1-drops to do that. Or like different off-curve or like odd versus even casting cost things. So I think that Varro might actually kind of be breaking out into the meta now. We'll see. I need to do more testing, but let's get into the games and you guys can let me know what you think. We're obviously still, not super high in Legendary Division, so a lot could change between now and then. But we're just going to go up the ranks here. I think my cat's going to make a quick visit. Hi there. Come on. Move along. There we go. It's always when I'm recording, she's got to have attention. She knows that I'm giving my attention elsewhere. All right, so this is going to be against Anva. And I thought this was actually nice because, not a lot of people are playing Tau. So I kind of wanted to see how he plays, especially because he got really, really nerfed very hard. So logic here, don't really need my Death from Above now. Don't really want a 6-drop stranded in my hand. But I'm going to keep the Inspired Retribution because of the shields units from the Tau that can be actually pretty annoying to deal with. And then obviously keep the Firstborn, which is, pretty ideal, what you want to be running out on turn 2. Again, you're really going to play this essentially the same way you would play Uriel, but then at certain points you're going to be codexing off of your Warlord ability, or just spending, part of your turn getting some card advantage to close things out. So we're on the draw, which honestly can be pretty devastating with this kind of start. So you'll get to see what we do here, right? So exactly what I said. We're going to Firstborn, pump it. We're going to Tactical Insight, and then we're going to Hive Factory to run out the Intercessor Sergeant, which again, I've been like reasonably impressed with. I think there is a power to having these kind of front-loaded, aggressive 3-drops. I just think that that's a really important kind of strength of the Ultramarines. So turn 1. And they do have Pulse Onslaught to actually take out our Firstborn, because otherwise we would probably run away with the game off of continual Codex triggers, because they wouldn't be able to stop us from using our Warlord ability. So they're able to answer it. We don't have many cards in hand, but as you'll see throughout this game, it doesn't really matter because we'll get them later. So perfect. We draw Stern Guard. Just again, very aggressive option. We're not going to hit with our Intercessor Sergeant because we want them to use their Warlord action to take out a unit. It's a pretty good use of the Kion tactics. Being able to take out the Stern Guard Sergeant is definitely the way. But they don't have anything else other than using their Supreme ability this turn. So this gets to just sit on the board for quite a while, as you'll see. And does end up nabbing us pretty important advantage later on in the game. So this is our turn. Don't have anything to play. Great. Let's Master of Arcana. Here I think this was a bit of a misplay. It doesn't really matter if I trigger Codex or not this turn, but I kind of was like, alright, let me put a shield on it. Makes it more annoying. They're going to have to trade at least another 2 damage into it to try and get rid of it, even if they've got a flanker or something. But I think probably I would have been better to draw a card there. So just don't get too tunnel visioned into Codex like I did that turn, because it doesn't really matter for things like Stern Guard, Intercessor, because there wasn't even anything on the board to care about. So here it's really about using your Smite, plus the Blank the Shot, plus the Stern Guard Sergeant to guarantee that we're going to clean up everything and keep our Stern Guard Intercessor, rather, on the board. So we're just going to spread the damage, make use of our point blank, guarantee that the 1 damage goes either way, it doesn't really matter. Draw our card, and move about our turn. So cleared their board, kept our guy on board. Pretty happy with that. Stern Guard's going to eat another Marker Light trigger, which doesn't really matter, and gets to trade for 4. So he's really done his job, I would say, keeping us ahead on board. And then this turn, they're going to get to, kind of reverse the tempo on us, which is difficult. But we do have the Storm Raven, so that can clean up things. But I think here we just run out the Primaris Interceptor to be able to take out. And you definitely want to go for the Marker Light drones, even though they have less ranged attack than the Pathfinder itself. They just have way higher impact. So here we're going to use a combination of Smite and our Warlord attack and the Interceptor to pretty much take out the units that matter. So we're just going to chug along. And it's here that they have a unit that's pretty problematic, but we've got the Inspired Retribution in our hand. So they hang out to their Pathfinder there. So this turn, I think really the clearest play is to Inspired Retribution, although I'd thought about playing Sergeant to try and trade over a series of turns. It's just a huge kind of investment if we don't Inspired Retribution there. And so here again, we don't have much to do on 2 energy, but we get to draw a card. And we draw a stratagem. At this point in the game, when you're getting into 7 and 8 energy turns, that's where you're looking to really set up your double Death from Above, swing, closing out the game. And here they're, setting up a pretty decent wide board that we can't interact with. Luckily, we've got the Storm Raven to, have a decent turn for us. Could run out Sergeant plus draw a card, but it just doesn't really do anything for us. So I'd rather get the Stealth Drone also off the board. We are going to hit because we've, got abilities to close out the game. And I think I just Scryer Gaze here, right? Yep. And I think about tactical inciting here to just Death from Above, on curve. But again, we're not going to really get any Codex advantage. And next turn, we can potentially play our Librarian and get more advantage, or maybe our Sergeant plus, or both of our Sergeants rather. So I think it was wise to probably hold it. And they set up a very good defense here. It's at this point in the game where I'm like, all right, I really need to try and close things out because, again, Anvas still has the ability to put those Storm of Fires in the hand. And I figured they nabbed a shield maybe earlier on. So they probably have maybe like one Stormfire in their hand, and then they can nab another one as well. And I guess this player thought that they had won at this point, but let me tell you, we're gonna fire back here. So Intercessor does some really important work for us, pinging off these shields. We got really lucky with the trigger not hitting the Shasu stealth suit again. So we get to trigger again, peel that off, and we take a slightly longer approach in killing the Vanguard unit just so that they don't have as favorable a trade on our Inceptor Sergeant. And so we've got and again, off of Varro's ability, we've managed to nab both of our Death from Aboves by 10 energy, which is like exactly what you want to do, right? You play out your units first, get your card advantage later. So Uriel kind of does the same thing and pressures in a different way. But yeah, and they have to clear. And I think pretty greedily decided to take 5 off of the Inceptor. I don't know why they chose to do that, because they could have cleared it with the Shasu instead. But they wanted the unit to live. But you just can't do that into a deck like this, because we just have so many ways to burn this person out of the game. That's exactly what we do. So, that's I would say that's like the ideal kind of way to play Varro. Oh, that was weird. It's a weird end game thing. Okay. Let's get right back into the battle log. All right. We got to see some... I said it actually in the other video. We were going to have some Ultramarine on Ultramarine violence, and then didn't get paired into them. But here, we've got Varro into Calgar to settle the dispute of who is better. Not really, but it does end up being a good game. Again, Mulligan, you don't want to see your Death from Aboves in your opening hand. You just want to see units. Same thing you would do with Uriel aggro. So I think that's also why I like this deck, is I feel very familiar with the playstyle. But I just love the kind of dynamic quality of Varro. There is a drawback to not being able to have an ability like Uriel's to pressure face and having extra damage, but you kind of have that with Varro's Smite. But then you've also got the card advantage on top of it. So again, we're going to get a pretty ideal start here with Firstborn into Sternguard Sergeant, and then kind of go from there. And we have to play this aggressively. Yes, we're down 5 life, but like that, they're not adding to the board. They're drawing a card. We just want to be out aggressing them to try and close things out. And I think we just have a really solid curve this game. Being able to play Chaplain next turn, they have to make a tough choice here, as I don't attack with the Firstborn, so they're going to have to use their 1 attack from the Warlord probably to clear that, which leaves the Sternguard hopefully alive. And that is essentially what happens here. They're going to trade 3 damage into it. But now that the Sternguard has 4 health, which it didn't used to, it's actually such a big deal, that 1 point of health. So we get to play our Primaris Chaplain. We're going to get our trigger, which was nice to kill either one. Either way, we're happy. We're going to use our Warlord with his cool attack animation to take that out. And then keep the Sternguard on board, because you're still going to have to use a resource on their turn to clear it out. But here, they make the right call to just make sure that this Chaplain dies. And they end up taking quite a lot of damage to do that, and it gets a 2-for-1 essentially. So it's here that, unfortunately, we're going to have a harder time guaranteeing the Codex, but we're still going to draw a card. We're going to hit face, and then we're going to pass the turn, make them have to use their Warlord attack to clear it. It's a little greedy on my part. Like, Sternguard could die to any number of things, but there's not a huge difference. The main difference is that they're having to use that attack, and we don't have to do that. So here we've just got a pretty good line where we're going to play Calcius and Tactical Insight immediately, take advantage of 6 damage to the face. We've already got 6 points of burn in hand. We've also got Inspired Retribution if we need to clear any Vanguard units to keep attacking. So this is just a pretty ideal curve this whole time. Um, and then we hit Humanity Shield, which is just kind of like icing on the cake. They're at 9 life at 6 energy, which is really crazy for Calgar. And we know that pretty much if we just keep punching face, as long as they don't play a Vanguard unit, there's going to be very little that they can do. But with the new Codex trigger, they're actually able to clear out Calcius off of those 2 attacks. So that was a pretty good response from our opponent. But here, it's just like, great. It's a pretty good turn to Storm Raven and then play Sergeant to pick something else off. Probably no matter what, we're just going to hit face because we're getting them in lethal range. Because it's lethal on 7 energy, right? Because you've got Death from Above for 4, and then you've got your Smite ability for a minimum of 1 damage, right? So, we've got quite a bit of reach in this deck. And here, they actually have a nuts turn. They're able to shield, do that, Tactical Insight, shield and draw again to keep on the shield for the following turn. And play, I think it's the 3rd Company Bike to take out the Stern Guard. I mean, definitely this was, if we didn't have the kind of draw that we had, we would probably lose the following turn. But we have the Humanity Shield even so if we needed to buy a little bit more time. And again, unlike Calgar, we can kind of guarantee that we're going to stick stratagems in our hand that will help us close out the game. So we actually just smite to guarantee that we peel that off. It doesn't really matter how we do this. Either way, attacking or smiting, because we've got the Death from Above. But that's going to be more than enough to kill good old Calgar. Just the Varro showing him what the power of stratagems. But still a really close game, right? Like if we didn't have like a pretty ideal aggressive curve, right? I think it's still very, very hard to win those games. All right, folks. Thanks for sticking with me. Let's do one more game, just again to kind of showcase a little bit of the power of Varro here. So I think it'd be really fun to see more of this warlord in the meta. So here, I know that other players may feel differently, but I'm going to keep Humanity Shield in my opening hand. Again, playing as more of the aggressive deck, this just can buy so much time. But yeah, I'm going to ship everything else back. Again, I want to start pretty aggressively. So we actually start out with some burn in our hand, which is not ideal, but we've got the Stern Guard Sergeant, and we're on the draw, so having the high factory allows us to kind of have a nice kind of pivotal turn to fix our curve. And here I could run out the Sergeant and then like do the opposite and use my ability next turn, but I think I'd rather hold the high factory if I can to fix our curve and gain some tempo. I wouldn't encourage like forcing it like super early because it's more pivotal when you get like double 6 drop, double 5 drop to fix your curve. So, and then here we actually get to see Avenging Zeal, so that's also why I wanted to show this game. So first Codex trigger, it's going to go down to 7. You can see that fun little animation there. And then we've got the Chaplain to follow up next turn, so that's going to bring it down to 6. And then if one of those units lives, and here they've got a really slow start with infinite biomorphologies, this is going to go down to 5, and we'll kind of see from there, how aggressive we can be. So, and I'm so glad that Avenging Zeal actually feels playable now. It was such a win more card before, but now it actually feels like it's doing something special. So there we get the double Codex trigger because both of them are on the board, and that drops Avenging Zeal down to 5 before our 5 energy turn. So that's pretty sweet. It's here I'm saying, okay, yeah, I've got a handful of stratagems, but now I drew an additional unit and I slam this, and I'm going to hit them for 10. on 5 energy, or actually 11 because this buffs itself too. So we're gonna bring them to 9 on 5 energy with this kind of start. So obviously pretty ideal scenario, but that's kind of why I wanted to try this build plus Avenging Zeal with Varro, because you could have something explosive like this. And so it's like, you can't do anything, right? My warlord has 4, I've got a DFA, I've got a Storm from the Above, or Storm Raven. I've got my Smite. Probably the quickest game of Warpforge that I've played in a long time. But to be fair, obviously that's a pretty ideal matchup with Neurothrope, and they were not, having to play anything on the board for me to answer. So, yeah, just some closing thoughts. Again, nothing revolutionary here. Really, the biggest addition is going to be Avenging Zeal. But I think that Varro makes this card worthwhile, and I think this card is so much better than it used to be, with the amount of codex support that it has, and the fact that it can cheapen itself is just like such a powerful ability. And I think people get kind of hung up on like, oh, it's a win more, like you got to have units in your hand, blah blah blah. But like as you saw, playing this on 5 energy and making your warlord hit for 4, right? Like this mini Draconian, and it also affects your ranged attack, which is so you get a bump there. Is just really strong when you're the aggressor already, right? It would also, like, if they were putting up more defense and I played that, I'm still probably going to clear whatever has a 4 health unit with just my attack from my warlord, and then hit them in the face with a huge chaplain, as it were, for like 7 damage, I think, that turn. So I think this card is the real deal. I think you can probably play it in Calgar too. Again, I think I'm going to try playing Calgar a little less vehicle-centric, but I will say I'm probably going to get at least a Varro vehicle deck list up on the channel at some point. Maybe after I do a little bit of exploring with the Necrons with their new rework as well. Just to see if, trying to nab my battlefield supremacy is like good enough to be playing that sort of style of deck. But yeah, I mean, Avenging Zeal saw it pretty insanely powerful if you can do kind of what we did with our curve out. Again, I think you could tweak some numbers. You could maybe put in another point blank shot or something, but I've been very happy with this sort of construction. Noteworthy, I have 2 Storm Ravens instead of 1, as opposed to my Uriel deck. But that's just because we kind of just want to fish for burn later on anyway. And just again, you want to have your opening hand, just some of the tips for the mulligan. You just want to have units. You want to be curving out. And then on 5, 6, 7 energy turns, when you're playing like a cheap 2-drop or 3-drop, or clearing some of their stuff, then you're going to pay 2 energy to draw a stratagem. So far I've been really happy with this. I'm not playing the Judiciary, which stuns. Again, I just haven't been terribly happy with that card overall, and I'd rather have something like Polixis and the Impulsor. And I just really like the curve of this deck. Lots of cheap stuff to be doing, so it allows us to use Varro's ability pretty heavily. We've got like a nice just like package of the Primaris Chaplain plus our burn. We've got some of this kind of mid-range. We've got obviously Inspired Retribution, but kind of mid-game stabilizing stuff, or just kind of like pushing the pressure. Our 6-drops kind of either answer what they're doing or push the tempo with the damage off of Calcius. And then our late game is really just, some value and card advantage off of Librarian. And then Avenging Zeal, to potentially just kind of come out of nowhere very cheaply, and just sort of dismantle your opponent. So, as you can tell, I'm super excited that Varro is potentially back, and potentially one of the better options for Ultramarines. As of this video, we'll have 1 for Uriel, Calgar, and Varro. I would say out of the 3, I feel most confident about Uriel and Varro. Definitely need to do a bit more experimenting with Calgar. Still a little skeptical overall about the vehicles package. But it's just so nice to be doing different things with Ultramarines and playing with different warlords. It's been a long time for the good old Space Marines here. So other than that, as always, thank you for your support and sticking with the video and sticking with the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.